What's up, guys? We are back with another Bandai Tamashii Nation's SH MonsterArts review, taking a look at, honestly, something that I never thought I would get my hands on, because for the longest time, this thing was, I guess, one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive figures in the line because of size, upfront cost, perceived rarity, a lack of sellers, I suppose. But they finally put out a reissue for BIOLLANTE. It's humongous. So we've got the BIOLLANTE special color version here, and as you can see, this beast comes in a massive box. I mean, I've seen this thing in person before, but it's been a while, and it didn't quite register with me just how big this thing was going to be. So we've got something pretty special to take a look at. We've got BIOLLANTE here in, again, a very massive, oversized box. You've got a big product shot here on the front. Not really a whole lot to speak of on the sides. It's kind of like a wraparound package, and then you've got a product shot over here, and then the back is kind of your typical Bandai Spirits type of stuff. So you've got a bunch of product shots showcasing how it moves and all the stuff it comes with. So yeah, we got a big one to take a look at today. So let's do it. Let's pull them out and take a look. And here we go, out of the package, our special color SH MonsterArts BIOLLANTE. This thing is... it's pretty wacky. This thing is really, really ridiculous because in a general sense, when you think about this monster, it doesn't really necessarily, at least to me, lend itself to being something that you'd think, oh, I'm going to get a big monster action figure out of this because BIOLLANTE is enormous. And this thing is enormous. This is easily one of the bigger figures that I have at the moment, and there is a lot going on here. But at the same time, maybe there's not a lot going on. This is one of those weird toys where there is a lot to talk about, but at the same time, it's very much a what you see is what you get kind of thing. Because while she is very articulated, she's still just sort of like a fixture that's going to be on your shelf. Because BIOLLANTE moves, but it's not something that has legs. It's not something that has normal arms. It doesn't have a torso. It doesn't have stuff like that. So its articulation is different, substantial, but again, different. So let's see what it can do, see how it moves around. We've got, what I think is the best part about this is when it comes to the head and the neck situation. So you've got really, really good range up, and then you've got really good range down. The interesting part about this is that like sort of the throat of BIOLLANTE acts as your support. So you lift that piece up and the head is all the way up. And then of course you can open that mouth and you can see a tremendous maw full of teeth in there. There is a really good tilt side to side, so you get it to go sort of all the way around. But at the same time, you do have to watch this piece here because you do have sort of just a chasm that goes inside the figure itself due to the light feature that this thing has. And we'll talk about that here shortly because it doesn't really factor into articulation. The top of the figure of BIOLLANTE is a separate piece. It actually sits in sort of a channel on the back that is spring-loaded, and it clamps it into the frame of the base. So if you wanted, you could pull this thing up, and then you could pull it out a little bit more and kind of frame it up a little bit higher. But at the same time, it's not really going to sit that well there. You can maybe get it to elevate just a little bit higher, though, if you wanted to kind of get wild with it. Clearly, the big and maybe the most impressive aspect of this figure, though, are the pseudo legs that it has and then the tendrils. So these are, rudimentary legs that it has almost, and these actually do move. They shimmy back and forth really is all they do, but they do move. And then you've got the big tendrils here, which are very movable, very, very posable, and they go all over the place. So each segment that you see here, we've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, a dozen plus. All of these are ball jointed, so they do have a pretty good range of motion. You can get it to go backwards, forwards, side to side, and then if we take it apart here, you can sort of see what I'm talking about, where it'll crook around, you can twist it, and then just sort of get it into weird and goofy positions, and then of course each one is terminated with a mouth. So pop that back in, and then you can see we've got a mouth here, which is on an articulated hinging jaw there. So there is a lot of articulation with this thing, but at the same time, it is still very different. So there is basically just up and down motion, shimmy back and forth at the legs, and then you've got your tendrils, your arms, so to speak, that you can push and pull all over the place because it does have a series of ball pegs to keep things constantly articulated. So everything's very sturdy. You can have them all the way up if you wanted, to really kind of raise it up super high. This thing is like 8 inches tall up to about here, 8.5, and then like 14 inches wide. But when you get these guys all the way up, it changes sort of the profile of the figure quite a bit to where everything else is much, much bigger. So you can sort of change the idea behind your display a little bit depending on how you articulate these. So they very much do what they're meant to do. So again, it's kind of one of those things where, yeah, there's a lot going on here, but at the same time, each one of these is very much the same. So you know what's going on with each one of these tendrils. And then the rest of the figure is really just a neck, basically, with segmented articulation. And then I don't know, I guess a throat support, for lack of a better term. Articulation aside, though, without a doubt, the big thing for Biollante is Biollante. It's just everything about the shelf presence, the design, the overall scale of this figure. So, of course, this is a MonsterArts figure, and they aren't necessarily huge when it comes to your normal figures. You know, your normal Godzillas, other kaiju, things like that. They aren't massive figures. So Biollante doesn't necessarily scale all that well with things outside of MonsterArts, but at the same time, it's still a really big figure. Like I mentioned, you know, up to about here, if we're taking just sort of the body into consideration, our weird Godzilla Rose human hybrid is about 8.5 inches tall. And then from tendril to tendril, like, you know, kind of the base of them before they start to crook outwards, you're looking at about 14 inches. So there is a lot going on here as far as shelf presence. It is a very varied figure when it comes to the overall design. So you've got sort of its, you know, rooty base here at the bottom with sort of like almost like a stump and like a stem aspect, because of course this is a plant-based monster in many ways. And you've got all of this sort of like mesh and rooted weave type of patterning here that runs up around the big globe and orb that's in there, which we will talk about here shortly, which all goes into the tendrils and then sort of the vines. And everything is covered in a great deal of sculpted detail, a great deal of paintwork and shading. And again, this is the special color version, so it is a slight difference from the original release from, I don't know what, like 7-8 years ago. But I really do dig the color scheme that we've got going on here. And then, of course, all of them have the little mouths at the end, which have a fully painted interior mouth, fully painted teeth, the whole 9 yards, basically. And the fact that just, I mean, when you look at this thing, it's incredibly impressive. Even if you don't know what this is, it's kind of one of those, yeah, I need to look at that. I need to take a minute and see what's going on, because it's a visually striking piece. There is a ton of sculpt all over it, especially on the body, I guess the trunk of the beast here. Tons of very Godzilla-esque spines that run down the back, again with tons and tons of shading, sculpt work, line work, the whole 9 yards really. And then of course you've got it's not exactly a Godzilla mouth, but it's similar. It's very crocodilian or like Mosasaurus almost in nature. And there's just like 1,000,001 teeth in there. You've got the little tiny eyes that are painted really nice and cleanly. And then all of those sort of teeth and tusks almost that are jutting out of the face. It's a really impressive looking creature. And this was actually designed by the guy that designed Biollante. So there's obviously a lot of love that goes into this thing because, well, he designed the suit, he designed the prop, he designed the toy as well, which I think is a really cool idea just from a collector standpoint. It shows that there's a lineage when it comes to where this creature comes from. So you know that there's no detail spared when it comes to Biollante. Everything is just really nicely executed, incredibly well done, and expertly crafted and painted. It's a very, very standout, very centerpiece type of figure. There is one other aspect to this figure, though, that we have to talk about, and that's the sort of underbelly that's under all of this rooted design here on the chest. Do we want to call it the chest? And that's kind of that orb that sits inside of Biollante. And it is a light, which I think is, I mean, it's just cool. I love light up features on figures, especially when it's something like this. So it has two settings. So you've got this one where it's sort of like a yellowy orange glow. And of course, in the right lighting or lack of light, I suppose it's going to light up a lot better. But of course, we want to be able to see the figure right now. So I've still got her kind of bathed in some light. And then we've got my favorite one, is the second option where it's kind of glowing that sort of dark kind of orange-red color, which I think looks fantastic. Use it as your new nightlight, I suppose. But this is a really cool feature. It basically takes up the entirety of the core of the figure. There's a big sort of I don't know, enclosure is the best way to describe it, that's underneath all of this here, and that's where the light is housed. So you'll see that if you were to take this big piece off, you can see the light inside, but it works really well. Again, it's just a simple switch. Flip it to one side, it's sort of the yellowy orange color. Flip it to the other, it's the darker, more menacing looking red orange color, and I'm really, really happy with the way this turned out. It makes the figure pop even more when you've got it in the right kind of display setting, and this light can be fully utilized. Now, as far as size comparisons go, I don't have a lot of MonsterArts stuff, but I do have some Godzilla figures, and I do have one that I think fits really well. So this is the 89 Godzilla. That's the Bile version from NECA. So this is the one he's covered in all of the gunk that Biolante spits all over the place. And you can see that these two aren't necessarily the most in scale because, of course, they're from different companies, but I think they fit pretty well. You can see that Biolante is still a very, very massive figure in terms of overall plastic and just size and shelf presence. And even though this is still a pretty bulky figure, Godzilla looks pretty diminutive by comparison. So I'm really happy that even though I don't have a MonsterArts figure that definitely fits specifically with this version or this particular monster, that even stuff that is from another company will mesh rather well. As far as other stuff, just for general size comparison, here is probably the best thing to use. Just a simple 6-inch figure. So here is our regular Mandalorian up front with Biolante, and you can see that, quite a huge figure overall. There is a lot of plastic here, a great deal of shelf presence again, and it's just it's going to basically dwarf any normal figure that you have that is inside the sort of 6-inch scale. They don't scale together, of course, but it's going to give you an idea of exactly how big this thing is and how much shelf space this thing's going to take up. So yeah, this is a really solid figure. It is a very expensive figure. Obviously we have to mention that. It is very expensive. It's also a very large import figure with a light up feature. So I'm not so sure that the price isn't too out there. It is what it is, basically. It's a big hunk of plastic with a ton of detail and paint with a big monster light in the middle. I'm really happy with it. I'm happy to finally own one of these, and I fully understand why people really were willing to pay tons and tons of money for this for so long on the aftermarket. It really is a cool piece. It's one of those things that's going to make people stop and just kind of gawk at it for a minute, and it's going to be a centerpiece in any kind of Godzilla or monster collection. So that's going to do it for this look at the SH MonsterArts Special Color Biolante. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.